My guest today is Laura Nguyen. Laura is the founder of Soul Solutions, spelled Solle. And Soul Solutions is a marketing consulting practice focused on performance and digital marketing. So she has 20 years of experience leading high-performing teams. She helps businesses maximize lead generation primarily. In addition to marketing consulting, Laura is an executive coach. I almost said an excellent coach, which I'm sure is also true, helping mid-career professionals overcome burnout and design fulfilling lives. So today she is going to talk about what happened to her personally when she burned out at her corporate job, what she did about it, and her unique approach that she now shares with others to help them overcome the same situation. So let's dive right in. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you, Linda, for having me. So wonderful to be here.
I'm glad that Taz Bober, God forbid I say Taz, because she will come after me. I don't know why there's just this thing about putting a Z on that word, but I'm so happy she introduced us. So yeah, before we get into our main topic, I always ask people, what is something fun that, about them that people don't know? And you said that you have become a big Disney fan. Now, I used to live near Disneyland. I don't have kids, so I really didn't go. But tell me about that. You said it's a new thing?
It's a new thing, yes. So as a kid growing up, we didn't have massive vacations, or when we actually went to Orlando, I was too cool for Disney World. So I was like, I'm going to Universal. But my daughter's 4. And in the past few years, we've had the opportunity to go. And it's been such a blast in experiencing all this magic and wonder from the eyes of a 4-year-old that we've just fallen in love with it. And so we try to go as often as we can. And we'll just, we live in Des Moines, Iowa, so it's not like we're close.
Right.
But the flights are cheap and we can head down there periodically.
Oh, that sounds like fun. What's your favorite thing? What is your daughter like? Does she go on rides? Because when I was a kid, I was afraid of all of them.
So she is a huge Toy Story fan. And so we will hit up Space Ranger at Magic Kingdom because it's you get to shoot the aliens, right? All the bad guys. And so she loves that one. And then also at Hollywood Studios, they have another Toy Story Mania where you get to shoot little darts and stuff. And she loves that. So I think when we go, that's a must. We have to hit those 2 rides for sure.
She chooses violence, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
Shoot aliens, she's in. And hey, she's getting ready.
She's a hero.
So, in speaking of fun, so one of the things that happens to segue into our main topic, which is burnout. I have so many questions about this. I'm not even sure where to start. But let's start with your story, because you told me before we started this interview, you told me the last time we spoke, that you were working at one point 75 hours a week. Is that true?
Yes.
How do you even work? Is that 16-hour days?
Yeah, it was. And I was working weekends and I was traveling during the time as well. Yeah. So I am a chronic overachiever. I was raised in a family of making sure that, if you got a B, then that was a problem. And so I'd always shift into a mentality of overwork. And so my first gig actually right out of college, which I love. I think it gave me a ton of great experiences, but because it was in the agency world, I had the opportunity to do so many things. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to do all of it. And so, I would spend my days doing client work, and in the evenings, I would be doing work that would be more developmental work. So that was when I was really interested in doing digital. So my evenings were spent doing digital clients, and then my daytime was spent doing corporate clients or pharma clients. And what ended up happening was that we ended up having to pull back and say, hey, my bill rate is just way too high and we need to pull back because it wasn't sustainable. And honestly, Linda, what we didn't talk about was my body actually told me that I needed to hit a pause button. And I was 24 when I had my first colonoscopy because we had to figure out what was going on. And, I think stress manifests in your gut and in your body in ways that, when you see a red flag, it's so often overlooked.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot from people because there's some saying, I forget how it goes, but like if you ignore the stress in your life, your body's going to like tap you on the shoulder and go, hello, and it's over and over. I hear that. So was there a turning point or a specific moment in time where you were like, okay, I've got to stop? Like what happened?
Yeah. So that was my first gig out of school. And, it was not until about 18 years later that I learned my lesson, to be totally honest with you. I think there was a yellow flag, probably a red flag during that first gig. And then where I just continued to kind of stuff it down and ignore it for the sake of continuing to perform. And I'm very driven. And so I continue to keep going. I think with COVID, having a child during that time period shifted my priorities. But I think the biggest shift for me happened when I lost a coworker. And so, I think I had someone working for me for about 1.5 years. And I think early in the process, she had found out that she was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And so we worked together, tried to figure out schedules and what that would look like. And she has 2 little kids that are my daughter's age. And so losing her was a completely life-shattering kind of reawakening for me, because it made me go, all right, mortality is real and I need to take a look at where my priorities are.
And she was young, right?
Yes.
That's not something you hear about. Like that's the kind of thing that really, like you said, it makes you think twice, like, or more, just what are we doing? You hear about that with people on Wall Street. I used to work as a personal trainer and I had some Wall Street clients and they were so high strung. And, this one person I'm thinking about in particular, he was just always stressed out. I used to work out with him at 9:00 at night because that was when he got home. And I was just starting my business as a trainer. So I would work whatever was required of me. And he, I don't know, whatever happened to him, but I heard that people, his coworkers were having heart attacks in their 30s. You just can't, keep that up. And so when that happened, so did you immediately, like, was it a gradual transition to like, okay, now I need to make some changes? Or did you just say, I'm out of here, and you just kind of quit everything?
It was gradual, to be honest. And similar, it takes me a while to get to a point of realization. But after I had found out the news of Amanda, one of the things that, I kept trying to think about was like, how do I, keep my team performing? How do I continue to keep everything together? And what does that look like? But like my evenings were really, really tough. Like I would just hold my daughter for those first few weeks and just cry. Yeah. And I think it got to the point where we had a family vacation over Thanksgiving. And it was the first time I hadn't brought my laptop with me in my entire career. And I put my cell phone, I turned it off and I put my cell phone in our luggage. And that for me was a shift. And I think that was kind of okay, like I'm ready to do something different and I need to be present. And it's really important for me to be present right now.
And did you have like a coach at that point? Because I know now we'll get into your coaching, but did you yourself have a coach at that time?
I did. Yes. Yes. So throughout the course of my career, I've had several coaches, both life coaches as well as executive coaches. And I've been really fortunate to have phenomenal mentors as well. And so, I think during that time period, it was our coaching engagement actually had really nothing to do with the life part of it, right? It was very much on how can I make sure organizationally we're in a good spot and really just helping me grow as a better leader. And so I think in that process, one of the things that I was trying to understand and think about for myself is like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And what are the things that I actually want to work on? Because I can continue to live this performance-based life, right? Where I'm continuing to hit metrics and continuing to kind of strive for the next rung on the ladder. But I want to focus more on a purpose-based life. And how do I even do that?
Yeah. Do you think this is something that is kind of in families or even culturally? I mean, was your family, as your parents, were they really driven and high achievers?
So, no, that's a great question. So I come from immigrants. My parents were Vietnamese refugees who came over here during the war. And there was always a message of, like this is a better life. We created a better life, and we want to make sure that you're continuing to perform and excel. And so there were high expectations for us of what we were going to do and what success looked like. And I will say that my parents always said, like, all we want is for you to be happy. But I think the definition of happiness, right, is it's not one that we dig into so often. And so often we actually continue to pursue the things that give us the accolades or that pat on the back, and living a life that, is worth living in a lot of ways are not measurable by, how much you have in your bank account or what title you have.
It's interesting because on a lighter note, have you ever seen, there's a guy on TikTok he plays the role of him and his father, and I think he's Chinese. And so the father is constantly yelling at him and comparing him to his cousin who's so much more successful. And he says, "Your cousin Timmy," and he does the accent and everything, and he doesn't actually have an accent, but he just is always, it's hilarious. But at the same time, that there's some truth to that. I mean, my mother's Japanese, but she was, she passed away, but she never had that kind of, she was just a hard worker in other ways. Like, she didn't have the corporate thing, or she didn't go to school past like high school. But my dad was Italian, and even his family, are they're all entrepreneurs. And it's almost like there's something inherent. My brother's not like me though. So I just was wondering, like, is it something that we're taught? Is it something that's like within us? It's sort of an interesting thing, but I think culture, plays some role.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, it's like the nurture versus nature kind of a thing, right? But I also think, like, even when we think about nature, it's so much of this like ingrained genetic history that we carry with us. And my parents are really interesting. Like, my dad's family is a fisherman's family, and my mom's family was more of a military and government family. And so my parents, came from very different places in the system. And I think that was always an interesting piece growing up as well, of, having a lot of wherewithal on one side and then having a lot of scarcity on the other.
Yeah. It's so just interesting to me how people grow up in different environments and how they turn out and stuff. So how did you address your burnout? So were you working with coaches at the time where you said, I'm going to make the switch? You turned off your phone and you had this realization. So what happened after that?
Yep. So for me, I need to be prepared. And it's probably a little bit of, right, my family's history of escaping Vietnam. Like, we talk about filling these barrels in preparation for them to escape Vietnam when the communist rule took over. And so, I think in our minds, it was always very much about, like, from my brother and I, how are you prepared? Always being 10 steps ahead. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And so when I decided to make this move, I wanted to make sure that it was one that I was prepared for. What was I going to do during this time? And so I knew I could leave and probably find another role, right? Like, that was definitely an option, but something just didn't feel right. I was so burnt out and so exhausted that I needed a break, Linda. Like, I just needed to take a step back and take some time off and figure out, how do I recharge and what's going to make me happy and what's the kind of work I want to do. And so I met with a ton of people. I met with all my mentors. We did day-long brainstorming sessions of how I was going to spend the next phase of my career. My friend Sean took out time during his day to do that, and I greatly appreciate him for it. And so I read all the books. I read every book I could. I read every article I could online of, like, how do you plan a career break? What do you do? But really the question I was trying to answer was, like, how do I change my brain? Like, how do I get my mojo back? How do I feel good again? And that's where I focused my energy. And so I built a curriculum for myself, to be honest, because I said, I'm going to take 3 months off and I need a plan. And so I said, all right, I'm going to spend a month in play. And that's all about being in a flow state, having fun, being in the moment. Then I did a month of pause, which is very much about, how do I kind of recenter, practice mindfulness, really just work on being present with myself and understanding, listening to that inner voice of, what do I want to be and what do I want to do? And then I felt like, okay, the next thing logically would be, let's spend a month of plan and figure out how I'm going to, spend the next second half of my career or whatever it might be. And so I set off on this journey to try to figure out what I was going to do. So that's kind of the structure that I used.
I just pictured you on this raft, like just going out into this new lifetime, this new life. Yes. How hard was the play part? Because I know, because I'm so much like you in a lot of ways. That's why I'm asking these questions, because it's like, am I like not the only one then that feels like this? But like to just not work. Did you, when you said play, I love the alliteration, by the way. So it's play, pause. What was it? Play, pause.
Play, pause, and play on.
Okay. So the play part, did you really not do any work? Or did you cheat and kind of?
So it was really, really hard. And I will say that I was looking for distractions, right? Like I needed something that would take me out of my physical environment so I wouldn't be tempted to go do something. And so, to be totally candid. Yes. And here's the other thing is I think psychologically in my brain, play was a reward. Play and rest were rewards to me. Like I had to earn them to be able to do it. So I think in my brain, in some way, shape, or form, I was like, oh, I earned play. Like I did a really good job, pat on the shoulder. Now I get to go play. And so we opened this with, our newfound love for Disney. And that's what I kicked off with, to be totally honest. I was like, I need a 4D immersive experience where I can't really be on my phone checking LinkedIn and figuring out what my next venture is going to be. And instead, I'm going to spend it with Mickey and staring at fireworks on the castle, over the castle. Like that's what we were going to do. So I took, my family and my parents, we went to Disney and we had a blast. And then my daughter and I, since we were already in Orlando, we were like, let's just like go to Port Canaveral and like hop on a ship and go on a cruise for a week and do some island hopping. So we did that and it was wonderful. But I will say that during that time, I recognized things about myself, like my people pleasing really turned on high. And I was like, wait, these were the things I was probably for sure doing at work. And this is how it's starting to manifest, even with strangers, You
give an example, like how would that?
Yeah, for sure. So my daughter, I had never been on a cruise before. And so my daughter and I were on this cruise and they have like set dinner times where it's like, okay, you have a rotational dinner at 5:30 and you need to make sure you're there at 5:30 because guess what? The next group of people come in at 7:30 or 8. Mm-hmm. And so my daughter and I would be like playing and we'd go, we'd be watching a movie on the deck and I would just be like, okay, let's get dressed. Let's go. We got to make it to dinner. And I would be forcing her to get to dinner. And she was so frustrated. And then we would be basically, I was like negotiating with her on how to get to dinner on time. I'm like, I'll take you to the store and you can buy something at the store or whatever it might be. And so one night I decided we're not going to go to dinner. Let's just hang out here. We'll just grab food later. I'm not going to worry about it. So the next morning when we showed up for breakfast, our wait staff said, oh, I missed you last night. We were waiting for you at dinner. And the guilt just hung on me. And I was like, well, so that night I was like, Alice, like, we got to make sure we get to dinner on time. Remember, our friends said we need that. They were waiting for us. And as the words were coming out of my mouth, I was like, I'm forcing something that like is not fun for us.
Yeah.
Because I was going to let a stranger down that, by the way, won't remember us the day we walk off, that ship. Right. And I was reflecting on that. And I think that for me was like, oh man, I need to figure out what I'm going to do because like this is a major issue if this is manifesting with strangers that I'll never see again.
That's such great self-awareness because it's almost like social media where, we worry about how many followers we have, how many likes we have, and we don't know most of the people who are following us. And why are we worried about this? And that's the kind of thing that carries over to all different things, so, but most people wouldn't catch it. So that's great on you. So, and then what happened? So what was the pause part of that? So the play, you did a lot of Disney, and then what was the pause?
Yep. And there's things that you can do and play at home. Like we were doing puzzles, like I was building Lego sets and like, doing Sudoku things, like things that would be just things you can do around the house, right? Mm-hmm. Like going to an art museum, like those were things that I planned when we got back. But to your point around pause, I needed to kick off pause with something that would be really, again, immersive. Like I was trying to find immersive, somewhat distracting things, to be honest, Linda, right? Because if I was just at home, it would be really hard. So I went on a meditation retreat for a week.
Oh, cool.
And before this, just so you know, I couldn't meditate for like 3 minutes. Like 3 minutes was probably my max. And during this time, like I was meditating for like 3 or 4 hours a day.
Wow.
And at the end of that week, like I could just physically feel the difference. Like I could see clearer. My my whole body felt lighter. Everything shifted internally for me. And so I said, well, whatever this feeling is, like I got to keep it going. And so, pause then became, how do I continue this meditation practice on a daily, if not 2 or 3 times a day perspective to keep it going? How do I continue to be reflective? So I started morning pages, which is a part of Julia Cameron's Artist's Way.
I have
love her stuff. Yes.
Nice.
So I did that practice. And then I did like a lot of, honestly, time of kind of sitting and trying to figure out, like letting all the thoughts flow through me versus feeling like I needed to do something about them.
Mm-hmm. So that was the main for 4 weeks. So what do you do now with meditation? Do you still do it every day?
I do. Yeah, I actually just did it right before we jumped on because I was like, I just think like we need to recenter myself before you and I chat. Yes, I do. So I have a couple of apps. Like I use a 10% Happier app. I use the Peloton app, which has a meditation piece. And then I'll just listen to like music on Spotify in the background. I recognize for myself that I need something that is background noise I can basically kind of tune out versus just pure silence.
Because I use Brain FM. Did you ever hear of that app?
Oh, yeah.
Brain.fm.
You like it?
It has, I listen to it. There's like 4 different channels, I guess you call, within the app. And one is meditation. You can do guided or unguided. And the unguided, you can determine, what kind of sound you want. I usually pick forest sounds. I live in Arizona, so that's really weird. But forest sounds or rain, because we don't get rain here. And I love the sound of rain. I don't like rain, like if it rains for days on it. But it really relaxes me. And then, they have other parts of it where it's, what do they call it? Binaural beats, where it helps you to focus, because I have a hard time focusing. And so throughout the day, I always have those plugged in because it's the only way I can focus on anything. But yeah, you just reminded me I need to do more with my meditation. Because if I do 8 minutes, it's long for me. It's like, just, it's hard. It
is. Yeah, for sure. I love this Brain FM one. I've heard of it and I've seen, but I haven't actually like put it into practice. So I'll definitely check that out, Linda. Thanks for the recommendation.
It is. I've been using it for a couple of years and I find that it really seems to help, because when I don't have, like this morning, my battery on my earbuds for some reason just crapped out on me. So I couldn't listen to it. I just try to listen to silence, and I can do that for a little bit, but it's much easier when I have that. So, but then tell me about, so the final part of this is the pursue. Is that, no.
Oh, plan.
Okay. I have my notes in front of me and I have the word pursue on there. So,
Good.
Plan. So what happens during that phase?
Yeah. So plan is, right, the concept of figuring out what you're going to do next. Like, how do you want to live an integrated life? What does that look like for you? So I started working on what are my core values as a person? Intentionally, where do I want to do? And how do I want to live? Like, what's the person, right? Who's the person I want to be? That was really the question that I was asking myself at the time. Now, naturally from there, career comes out, right? Because it becomes what do you want to do with your time? And so I had a really hard time I felt like there were obvious answers for what I should do. But not clear answers on what I wanted to do. And so I, naturally my, old habits die hard. And so I took an Excel sheet and I started to create like a weighted matrix on, here's all of my ideas of what I want to do. And here's how I'm going to score them. I'm going to score them based on how they align with my core values. If I have the competency to do it, if it's going to, cost money to do, what the on-ramp is to generate revenue, like all of these things, right? So I built this matrix and then I scored it using a weighted score. And some of the natural things floated up, which was like, I want to continue doing marketing work. I love marketing, but I needed something else as well. And so, at the time I had decided that I would do coaching because I love leading teams. I've spent the last 18 years leading teams. I love leading high performing teams and I love being a part of people's journey. And I think being a manager is, one of your greatest responsibilities. And so I wanted to continue doing that. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do coaching, and I'm going to coach maybe like 20% of the time, but most of my time is going to be on marketing consulting. And so, and a few other ideas came out. One of those was write a book. And I do, in fact, have a book coming out next September, which I'm excited for. And then, there were other ideas, and they're like, buy a farm or just live on a cruise ship for the rest of my life or whatever it might be, right? Like it can be
these are like
off the wall ideas.
Things. Or you can live on a farm on a cruise ship. There you can start your own create.
There you go. Yes, there were some kind of off the wall ideas for sure. But I was like, we've got kids and I probably need to be somewhat responsible.
There's the monkey wrench and all of that. But
yeah, exactly.
And so this is something now that you actually coach people to do. This is because you have a coaching plan, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, one of the things that I was going through the journey is the recognition that others were on the same path or preparing for the same path that I was. And so, as I was talking about a career break, I had talked to, other senior leaders, CEOs, other execs who had also taken a career break. And one of the things they had said to me was, I wish I had kind of more of a plan. And I was like, well, I did create a plan. Maybe I should share it with people so that they could fully reset and get something out of it. And so I took all of my templates and everything I've learned, and I've been spending the time coaching folks through their own career breaks in preparation for their career break. What are the things I honestly wish I had known or thought of in advance? And I spent probably 3 months interviewing people to just better understand their own, career break journey. What are the things they want to do that then informed my curriculum? And so, I work with folks now that are either in a career break or re-emerging and looking for a successful pivot and transition after their career break. And I'll say, I said earlier that I was planning on doing marketing consulting as like an 80% and coaching as a 20%. And, I'll share that like that's kind of shifted, honestly, as things naturally have been, because the work on helping folks and coaching folks in an executive coaching format, as well as a career break coaching format, has been so much more fulfilling in a different way.
And do you think it also has to do with just the way the state of the state of businesses right now? I mean, so many people, you go on LinkedIn, every other post is, I am leaving, my, and a lot of these jobs or positions that these people had were 1 or 2 years. And because they announced it. And I remember when they announced it, it's like, well, I'm leaving or I was laid off or, I'm looking for something else. Do you think that feeds into, people looking for this kind of a solution?
Yeah, I think burnout has been it's both a systemic my within organizations as well as a personal challenge, right? I would say there are things like I was talking about before for my own self of trying to self-regulate, right? And set healthier boundaries. But I think the other challenge becomes, how do organizations promote true mental health and well-being? And so I think it's a conversation that's happening within some organizations more than others. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the catalyst, right? For a lot of folks raising their hands and reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you help me through this journey? How do I think about this? And so, my goal is always to help guide someone through a journey that's their own personal journey. They don't need to follow my path, but I have ideas if they need it. And so, that's what I'm there for.
Do you think employers are more like, I wonder how much is lip service? Because it's almost like, I just, when I hear about, mental health, I mean, I know it's so important. I've battled my own mental health challenges, anxiety and stuff throughout my life. But do you think employers really are good at recognizing when someone is burned out? And if they do, I just see a lot of employers just pushing people to the edge and not really understanding what they're doing. I mean, do you think there really is a growing awareness, or what should be done maybe is more of the question?
I think that's a great question. I think, ultimately, one of the greatest challenges when it comes to burnout, I think there was a study that came out from Gallup that said 70% of the people who stated they were burnt out, really the core reason for that was a manager. And so I think when you think about management, one of the challenges is that think about what's the percentage of managers who are actually trained in being a skilled manager. Mm-hmm. We don't spend a lot of time investing in truly training our managers. We tend to promote those who are strong performers. And strong performance doesn't really equate to a strong manager, a strong people manager. And so I think at each level within an organization, that's one of the challenges is, they're equating it to poor management, poor leadership. And it's not when we say employer, typically that becomes a large we, right? Mm-hmm. But how do we help train within there the individuals that can help drive a difference? And so investing in leadership training, like having executive coaches for people, right? To help them be better leaders and better managers is one of the core benefits of having that. And so I think organizationally, there's a recognition. I think there was a study that said like 85% of HR leaders recognize that burnout is an issue. But here's the issue is that like, how can they then take it and turn it into tangible actions that actually influence employees and employees' lives?
Right.
And I think that comes down to kind of a more granular perspective on how do you help managers be stronger leaders?
Yeah, that's a huge question right there. Well, last thing is, so what if somebody, just as on the individual perspective, if someone feels really burned out, what is like one thing that they can do or start doing to kind of help themselves? Or what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think, the reason why I started with play, there's kind of like two pieces, which is the first thing is engage in something that brings you joy. I think when we're in burnout, it can feel hopeless and it can feel exhausting. Mm-hmm. And a way to recharge your systems is to find something that's going to bring you some joy. And that could just be, right, going to a park. It could be playing volleyball. It could be taking your kids out and doing something with your kids if you've got kids. It's about finding something that sparks your joy. I think that's really the key. The second is around rest. I think we often forget the importance of sleep. You came from the world of fitness, so recovery is so critical and important.
Yeah.
And so I think, people take for granted having a restful night of sleep is really the other piece is like, we probably spent, like, I can't tell you the number of times I spent just like going through all of my to-do lists, for 6 hours at night, right? And you're getting 3 hours of sleep. That is not the foundation that you need. And so sleep is the foundation of mental health, and you got to start there too.
And there's so many health issues that are associated with lack of sleep. I usually get 7.5 hours, and that seems to be good for me. But yeah, if I get less than that, I just feel it. So
yeah, so where the difference? Yeah.
Where can people find you? Now, your book isn't out until next September, so it's going to be a little while for that. Do you have a pre-sale or anything yet? Or
yes. Yep. So I do have just a link to go to. So if you go to lauranguyen.co, you can find my website there. I have included in there as well, just like high level overview for the book. I am excited. I'm launching a community the week of November 13th. So that's next week. And so one of the key pieces for me was in having all these conversations with people, right? I recognized that we felt really alone in our issues of burnout. And so I hope that this community will be a place where people can share their stories and find connection in this, in this sense.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes. And also people can find you on LinkedIn, of course.
Yes.
Right? So.
Yes. You can find me on LinkedIn. I post every day at 7:30.
Oh, great. You're better than me at the time. Just try to get in there at some point during the day.
Well, I try to schedule it.
Thanks so much, Laura. This has been so eye-opening and just great advice. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Linda, so much. Appreciate it. Take care.